Millions in offshore accounts, and an empire built on ruthlessness couldn't buy Leonardo Falcone the one thing he craved: an honest woman. Sick of gold diggers and superficial heiresses, New York's most feared underboss stripped away his wealth, stepping into the grimy streets to find a love money couldn't taint. Millions in offshore accounts and an empire built on pure ruthlessness could not buy Leonardo Falcone the one thing he truly craved: an honest woman. Sick of gold diggers and superficial heiresses whose eyes locked solely on his platinum Rolex and endless black Amex cards, New York's most feared underboss wanted out. To them, Leonardo was merely a lucrative bank account draped in custom Brioni suits. Exhausted by the hollow deception of high society ballrooms, he decided to strip away his immense wealth and step into the grimy streets to find a love that money couldn't taint. Handing over his encrypted phone and the keys to his sprawling empire to his fiercely loyal consigliere, Archie Leonardo issued his temporary farewell. "Keep our borders secure. Tell my father I am handling personal reconnaissance." Archie adjusted his glasses, watching his boss don a faded, oil-stained Carhartt jacket and scuffed work boots. "Queens is a long way from Fifth Avenue, Leo. You don't have to live like a stray to find a decent partner." "Yes, I do," Leonardo replied, his baritone voice resolute. "I need someone who doesn't see the Falcone crest." By the very next noon, Leonardo, now operating under the alias Leon, was sweeping the filthy floors of a dilapidated garage in Astoria. He rented a drafty, miserable apartment above a loud laundromat, fully embracing the grinding reality of a destitute laborer. Just 3 doors down stood Astoria Sweets, a neighborhood bakery smelling of burnt sugar and strong espresso. That was where he first saw Penelope Hayes. Penny was heavily overweight, a daily physical reality that society ruthlessly refused to let her forget. At 250 pounds, she was accustomed to cruel whispers and the invisible walls men built around her. She hid her body beneath oversized, flour-dusted aprons, but beneath those layers of deep insecurity lay a woman of startling, quiet beauty. She had soulful hazel eyes, flawless porcelain skin, and a deeply comforting smile. Leonardo first entered the bakery on a freezing Tuesday, his hands deliberately blackened with grease. He stood quietly at the back of the line. Directly in front of him, a slender woman in a pristine designer coat impatiently tapped her manicured nails against the display glass. "Excuse me." The woman snapped at Penny, who was carefully boxing a dozen pastries. "Can you hurry up? Some of us actually have careers, and maybe skip tasting the merchandise. Honey, it looks like you've had enough." Leonardo's jaw immediately clenched. His predatory instincts flared, ready to drag the arrogant customer out into the freezing snow. But Penny simply paused. Masking a flicker of deep, familiar pain, she offered a polite, unbreakable grace. She handed over the bakery box with a soft, genuine smile, wishing the cruel woman a wonderful day. Stepping up to the counter next, Leonardo feigned absolute poverty, counting out crumpled single-dollar bills for a plain black coffee. Recognizing his apparent exhaustion, Penny quietly slipped a massive, freshly baked turkey sandwich into his paper bag. "It's yesterday's bread," she lied smoothly, refusing his meager money. "It's on the house." Walking out into the biting wind, Leonardo opened the bag to find steaming, perfectly fresh food. For the first time in his entire life, the ruthless underboss felt a genuine, unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest. The cruelty in the woman's voice was sharp enough to draw blood. Leonardo's jaw clenched, his instincts honed by years of punishing disrespect with brutal violence flared. He took a half step forward, ready to drag the arrogant woman out by her designer collar. But Penny simply paused. A brief flicker of deep, familiar pain flashed in her hazel eyes, but she quickly masked it with a polite, unbreakable grace. "I apologize for the wait, ma'am," Penny said softly, her voice melodic and calm. "Your order is ready. Have a wonderful day." The woman snatched the box, turning around and deliberately bumping into Leonardo as she left. "Watch it trash," she muttered, side-eyeing his stained jacket before storming out into the snow. Leonardo stepped up to the counter. He looked at Penny, expecting her to be crying or angry. Instead, she offered him a warm, genuine smile. "I'm sorry about that," she said, wiping down the counter. "People get cranky when it snows. What can I get you?" "Just a black coffee," Leonardo said, keeping his eyes on her. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a handful of crumpled single-dollar bills and a few dimes, pretending to struggle with the exact change. Penny watched his dirt-stained, calloused hands that, unbeknownst to her, had ended lives and commanded empires. She saw the frayed cuffs of his jacket and the exhaustion etched into his handsome, stubble-covered face. "You look like you've been freezing out there all morning." Penny noted her voice, lacking even an ounce of pity. It was just pure, unfiltered empathy. She turned around and grabbed a massive, freshly baked turkey and provolone sandwich on focaccia bread, placing it in a bag, along with a large black coffee. "I didn't order the sandwich," Leonardo said gruffly. "I can't afford it." "It's yesterday's bread," Penny lied smoothly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "My boss makes me throw it out anyway. I'd rather it go to a hard-working guy than the dumpster. It's on the house." Leonardo stared at the brown paper bag. In his world, nothing was free. Every favor was a transaction, every gift a silent contract. He looked up at Penny, searching her face for an ulterior motive. He found none. Just a kind, overweight woman working a minimum-wage job, offering a stranger her own dignity. "Thank you," Leonardo murmured, taking the bag. "I'm Penny," she smiled. "Leon," he replied. As he walked out into the biting wind, Leonardo opened the bag. The sandwich was steaming hot, the bread perfectly fresh. It was no leftover. She had paid for it herself. For the first time in his life, the ruthless underboss of the Falcone family felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. Over the next month, Leon the mechanic became a regular at Astoria Suites. Every day at noon he would sit in the small corner booth by the window, and Penny would spend her 15-minute break sitting across from him. They talked about everything and nothing. Leonardo listened, mesmerized, as Penny spoke about her dreams of opening her own culinary school for underprivileged kids. She never complained about her weight, but she spoke candidly about the world's perception of her. "It's like being a ghost," Penny said one afternoon, tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "People look right through you when you don't fit their aesthetic standard. Or worse, they look at you but they only see a joke. You learn to make yourself small, Leon, even when you take up a lot of space." Leonardo's chest tightened. "You shouldn't have to make yourself small for anyone," he said fiercely, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "Any man who looks at you and doesn't see a queen is a blind fool." Penny blushed furiously, looking down at her apron. No man had ever spoken to her like that. Certainly not a man as ruggedly handsome as Leon, whose piercing gaze made her feel exposed, yet entirely safe. She brushed it off with a self-deprecating laugh. "You're sweet, Leon. But I know the score." Leonardo knew he was falling for her. Penny was the antithesis of his world. She was pure forgiving and brutally honest. But the paranoia of the Mafia ran deep in his veins. He had to be absolutely certain. He had to know if her kindness was a superficial courtesy, or if she was truly willing to sacrifice for someone who had nothing to offer her in return. He devised a test, one that made him feel sick to his stomach, but one he deemed necessary. On a rainy Thursday evening, Leonardo waited outside the bakery until Penny locked the front doors. When she turned around, she jumped, startled to see him standing in the pouring rain, looking utterly defeated. He hadn't shaved in days, and he had deliberately smudged dirt across his cheek. "Leon, what are you doing out here? You're soaked!" Penny gasped immediately, popping open her umbrella and holding it over his tall frame, entirely disregarding that the rain was now hitting her own shoulders. "I didn't know where else to go," Leonardo said, forcing his voice to tremble. "I got fired from the garage today. My landlord locked me out of my apartment. I'm short $500 for the back rent, and if I don't have it by tonight, I'm sleeping on the street." Penny's face fell. She knew exactly what it meant to struggle in this city. She knew the biting cold of a New York night. What Leonardo didn't know was that Penny had been saving every spare dime for the past year in a glass jar under her bed. It was her tuition money for a master class at the Institute of Culinary Education, her one ticket out of the neighborhood bakery. She had exactly $540 saved. Penny didn't hesitate. "Come with me," she said gently, grabbing his arm and leading him down the block to her small, cramped ground-floor apartment. She made him sit on her worn-out sofa, handing him a towel to dry his hair. Then she walked into her bedroom. Leonardo sat in the dimly lit living room, listening to the rain hit the window. Guilt clawed at his throat. He had millions sitting in a Cayman Islands account, yet he was conning a bakery girl. He almost stood up to stop her to confess everything when she walked back into the room. Penny held out a stack of crumpled $20 and $50 bills. "Here," she said, pressing the money into his large hands. "It's $500. Go pay your landlord." Leonardo stared at the money, genuinely stunned. "Penny, I can't take this. How do you even have this? You work at a bakery. It doesn't matter," she lied, forcing a smile. "It's just savings. I don't need it right now. You need a roof over your head, Leon. Take it, please." Leonardo looked from the money to her face. He saw the slight tremor in her hands. He knew she was lying. He knew this was everything she had. She was giving up her own future for a broke mechanic she had known for barely a month. She had passed his test, shattering every cynical expectation he had ever held about humanity. "I will pay you back, Penny. Every cent," Leonardo swore, his voice thick with unfeigned emotion. "I know you will," she said softly. "Now go. Get your apartment back." The very next afternoon, the harsh reality of Leonardo's true life violently crashed into his fragile sanctuary. Penny was alone in the bakery, wiping down the espresso machine, while Leonardo sat in his usual booth, nursing a coffee. Suddenly, the chime above the door jingled aggressively. Two massive men in tailored dark suits stepped into the shop. Leonardo's blood ran cold. He instantly recognized them, Silvio and Dante, enforcers for the Russo family, the Falcone family's biggest rivals. They weren't looking for him. They were far out of their territory, likely running a low-level shakedown racket in Queens to scrounge up extra cash. Silvio, a man with a jagged scar across his neck, walked up to the counter, aggressively knocking over a display of cookies. "Hey, sweetheart," Silvio sneered at Penny, looking her up and down with obvious disgust. "Your boss is 3 weeks late on his neighborhood insurance fee. Where is he?" "He's not here," Penny said, her voice shaking slightly, but she stood her ground. "And we don't pay insurance to thugs. Get out before I call the cops." Dante laughed loudly. "Call the cops? That's cute." He reached across the counter, suddenly grabbing Penny by the collar of her apron, yanking her forward. "Listen to me, you fat cow. You open that register right now, or I'm gonna smash this place to pieces, starting with you." Penny let out a startled cry, terrified but trapped by his heavy grip. In a fraction of a second, the quiet, destitute mechanic vanished. The apex predator of the New York underworld awoke. Leonardo moved with terrifying, lethal speed. Before Dante could even blink, a massive hand clamped onto his wrist with the crushing force of an industrial vice. Dante cried out in shock, dropping Penny's apron. Leonardo stood between the thugs and Penny, his head tilted down his face, partially obscured by the shadow of his cap. "She said the boss isn't here." Leonardo growled his voice, dropping to a demonic, icy register that sent shivers down Penny's spine. Silvio reached inside his suit jacket, his eyes flashing with violent intent. "Back off, homeless trash, before I put a bullet in your—" Leonardo didn't let him finish. In one fluid motion, he stepped inside Silvio's guard, driving a devastating precise elbow into the man's sternum. Silvio collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, instantly incapacitated. Dante stumbled back, terrified by the sudden overwhelming violence from a man who looked like a street vagrant. He looked closely at Leonardo's face, catching a glimpse of his razor-sharp jaw and dead, merciless eyes. Recognition slowly dawned on Dante's face, followed immediately by sheer, paralyzing terror. "Falcone!" Dante whispered, his face draining of all color. Leonardo stepped forward, grabbing Dante by the lapels of his suit, pulling him close so Penny couldn't hear. "If I ever see your faces in this burrow again," Leonardo whispered into Dante's ear, his voice dripping with pure menace, "I won't just kill you. I will dismantle the entire Russo family, brick by brick. Take your trash and run." He shoved Dante backward. Dante scrambled to pull a wheezing Silvio off the floor, and the two enforcers bolted from the bakery as if the devil himself was chasing them. The bakery fell into a deafening silence, save for the hum of the refrigerators. Leonardo stood there, his chest heaving slightly. He slowly turned around to face Penny. She was pressed against the back counter, clutching her chest, her eyes wide with shock and fear. She had seen the raw, unbridled violence in him. She had seen the way grown men, terrified of nothing, had run from him in pure panic. "Penny!" Leonardo started taking a gentle step toward her. Who are you, Leon?" Penny asked, her voice trembling. "What did he call you?" Leonardo stopped. The illusion was fracturing. The woman who had sacrificed everything for a penniless mechanic was about to discover she had just financed the most dangerous mob boss on the East Coast. Silence filled the small bakery, heavy, suffocating, and terrifyingly cold. Leonardo stared at Penny, watching the unwavering trust in her hazel eyes slowly shatter into a million jagged pieces. He stepped forward, raising his hands in a desperate, placating gesture, but she instantly shrank back against the hissing espresso machine. "Stay away from me!" Penny breathed, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the marble counter. "That man. He looked at you like you were the devil. He called you Falcone, like the crime family they talk about on the late-night news. Who are you, really?" Leonardo slowly dropped his hands. The hunched, defeated posture of Leon the destitute mechanic melted away, entirely replaced by the towering, hardened stance of an underworld king. The transformation was so absolute it made Penny dizzy. "My name is Leonardo Falcone," he confessed, his voice steady, but laced with a profound, bitter regret. "I am the underboss of the Falcone Syndicate, and everything I told you about being a broke mechanic living above a laundromat was a lie." Tears welled immediately in Penny's eyes as the crushing weight of his words washed over her. Her mind raced back to the $500 her entire life, savings, her meticulously guarded ticket to culinary school that she had willingly pressed into his calloused hands just 24 hours ago. She had skipped lunches to save that money, She had walked 3 miles in the freezing rain to avoid paying subway fares, and he had taken it. A lie, she whispered, her voice cracking painfully. You let me give you everything I had. You sat in my cramped living room, watching me panic about you freezing to death on the streets, and you were a billionaire playing dress-up. It was a test, Penny, Leonardo pleaded, taking another step forward despite her visceral retreat. In my world, everyone wants a piece of my wealth. Women look at me and see nothing but offshore accounts and luxury properties. I had to know if someone could care for just a man with absolutely nothing. You gave me your last dime. You passed the test. Passed? Penny's profound sorrow morphed into sudden, blazing anger. The sheer audacity of his logic snapped something inside her. She grabbed the damp cloth she had been holding and hurled it at his broad chest. I am not one of your Mafia subjects, Leonardo. I am a human being. You didn't test my kindness, you ruthlessly exploited it. You looked at the fat, pathetic bakery girl who no one ever looks twice at, and you thought, let's see how far I can push her desperation for human connection. Get out. Leonardo felt a physical tearing ache in his chest, sharper than any knife wound he had ever sustained. Penny, please. I swear to you it wasn't like that. You are the most beautiful, genuine, incredible woman I have ever met. I wanted to protect you. Get out. Oh! She screamed, her melodic voice tearing into a raw sob that echoed off the tiled walls. Before Leonardo could attempt to soothe her rage, the violent reality of his true life brutally interrupted them again. The front glass storefront of Astoria Suites shattered inward with a deafening explosion. High-caliber bullets tore through the display cases, pulverizing the tiered cakes and sending jagged shards of glass flying like deadly shrapnel. The Russo family thugs hadn't just run away in fear. Dante had immediately called in a hit squad, hoping to assassinate the Falcone underboss while he was isolated without his heavy security detail. Leonardo lunged with predatory speed, tackling Penny to the floor, just as a barrage of automatic gunfire ripped through the exact spot where she had been standing. He covered her entirely with his massive, muscular frame, acting as a human shield, while the bakery was mercilessly torn apart around them. Keep your head down and cover your ears, Leonardo roared over the deafening noise. He reached to the small of his back, drawing the sleek, black, customized Glock 19 he had secretly carried even in his mechanic disguise. As the shooting paused for a fraction of a second, while the attackers reloaded, Leonardo rolled out from behind the devastated counter. He fired 3 precise lethal shots through the shattered window. 2 men in dark coats dropped instantly on the snowy sidewalk outside. The third scrambled wildly into a black Cadillac Escalade tires, screeching against the winter pavement as the vehicle sped away. Within 90 seconds, the roar of high-performance engines filled the block. 4 armored Mercedes-Benz SUVs slammed to a halt outside the ruined bakery, blocking off the street. A dozen heavily armed men in immaculate suits poured out, securing the perimeter with military precision. Archie Leonardo's calculating consigliere stepped through the shattered doorway, his expensive shoes crunching over the broken glass. "Leo," Archie said, assessing the carnage with a cold, professional gaze. "We got the distress signal. Are you hit?" "I'm fine," Leonardo growled, holstering his weapon with a sharp click. He turned back to the counter, extending a gentle hand to help Penny up from the floor. Penny scrambled backward, pressing herself against the refrigerators, completely ignoring his outstretched hand. She looked at the hardened mobsters, holding assault rifles, the completely destroyed bakery she loved, and the bodies lying out on the sidewalk. She was trembling so violently, her teeth chattered. "Penny," Leonardo said softly, his heart breaking at the sheer terror radiating from her eyes. "Don't touch me," she sobbed, wrapping her oversized flour-stained sweater tightly around herself. "Just leave. Please. You've ruined everything." Knowing that his imposing presence was only pushing her further into shock, Leonardo gave her one last, agonizing look. He reached into his heavy coat, pulled out a thick, sealed envelope, and tossed it gently onto the counter, next to the ruined cash register. "Protect this block," Leonardo ordered Archie, his voice turning to ice as he walked out into the freezing wind. "If anyone from the Russo family so much as looks at this bakery again, burn their entire neighborhood to ash." Weeks dragged by, cold, grey, and utterly miserable. The bakery had been repaired almost overnight by an anonymous top-tier Manhattan construction firm, the exorbitant bills completely paid for by a shell corporation. Inside the envelope Leonardo had left behind was $50,000 in crisp, untraceable cash, along with a handwritten note that simply read, "For your culinary school. I am so sorry." Penny had taken the money and shoved it into a shoebox under her bed. She refused to spend a single cent of it. She went back to work, wiping down the new marble counters and boxing pastries, trying desperately to pretend the mechanic named Leon had never existed. But late at night, in the crushing silence of her tiny apartment, she wept for the man she thought she had known. She missed his gravelly laugh, his intense, protective eyes, and the way he had looked at her like she was the only woman in the room. Across the river in a sprawling Manhattan penthouse, Leonardo was a man possessed by vengeance and sorrow. He had systematically dismantled the Russo family's underground operations in brutal retaliation for the drive-by wiping their influence from the borough. But the violent victories brought him zero satisfaction. He sat in his study, surrounded by priceless Renaissance art and millions in bearer bonds, feeling completely hollow. He had finally found the honest, purely good woman he had been searching for, and his own cynical paranoia had driven her away. Archie watched his boss wither away behind his mahogany desk, a glass of untouched scotch resting by his hand. "Leo, you effectively took out the Russos. The city is firmly yours. But you look like a ghost." "I have everything, Archie, and I have absolutely nothing," Leonardo murmured, staring out at the glittering, sprawling skyline. "Prepare my car. I'm going back to Astoria." Valentine's Day evening, blanketed Queens in a soft, romantic snowfall. Penny was locking up the bakery, her heart heavy, as joyful couples walked past her, holding hands and carrying extravagant bouquets of red roses. She pulled her wool coat tight around her waist, resigned to spending another lonely holiday watching television, when a sleek, heavily armored Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a silent stop right at the curb. The heavy back door opened, and Leonardo stepped out into the snow. He was no longer dressed in stained denim and scuffed boots. He wore a custom-tailored midnight blue Tom Ford suit that perfectly accentuated his broad shoulders and lean waist. A diamond Patek Philippe watch caught the golden glow of the streetlights. He looked terrifyingly powerful, breathtakingly handsome, and completely out of place on the gritty Queens sidewalk. Penny froze the bakery keys, slipping from her numb fingers and clattering to the pavement. Leonardo walked slowly toward her, stopping a respectful few feet away. He hadn't brought his armed guards. He hadn't brought a weapon. He came only as a man begging for a second chance. "I told you to stay away from me," Penny said, her voice shaking, though her eyes betrayed the deep, aching longing she had tried so hard to suppress. "I tried," Leonardo confessed, his voice dropping to that intimate, gravelly baritone that always made her knees weak. "I tried to go back to my empire, Penny. But my life is entirely meaningless without you in it. You don't want me, Leonardo," she cried, frustration bubbling over as she gestured down at her heavy frame. Look at you. You literally own this city. You could have any supermodel, any billionaire heiress, any socialite on Park Avenue. I am a fat baker from Queens. I don't fit in your high society world. I'll just be an embarrassment to you at your fancy galas." Leonardo closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, completely ignoring her protests. He gently took her face in his large, warm hands, forcing her to look up into his dark, unwavering eyes. "Listen to me very carefully," he commanded softly, the absolute certainty in his voice cutting through the winter air. "I have spent my entire adult life surrounded by beautiful, thin plastic women with rotted, superficial souls. They are hollow, Penny. They are empty. You are the most substantial, profoundly beautiful thing I have ever known. You gave a homeless man your life savings to keep him warm. You stood up to armed Mafia thugs to protect your neighborhood. You have a heart of pure, unyielding gold, Penelope Hayes. You are a queen, and I don't give a damn about anyone else's shallow aesthetic standards. I only want you." Penny gasped, hot tears spilling fast down her flushed cheeks, melting the snowflakes that landed there. "You lied to me." "I did," he admitted freely, his thumb gently brushing away her tears. "It was the biggest mistake of my life, and I will spend the rest of my days making up for it. I bought the abandoned warehouse next door to the bakery. It's completely renovated. The culinary school for underprivileged kids. It opens next month entirely under your name." Penny stared at him completely, overwhelmed, her chest heaving. "Leonardo, forgive me, Penny. Let me love you. Let me show you how a real queen deserves to be treated." She looked deep into his eyes, searching for the ruthless, terrifying mafia boss that Dante had run from. But all she saw was Leon, the gentle man who had sat in her corner booth, drank her black coffee, and listened to her wildest dreams. Slowly she leaned forward, and Leonardo captured her lips in a deep, desperate, consuming kiss. It tasted like snow-salty tears and absolute, undeniable devotion. The feared underboss of New York hadn't just found an honest woman. He had found his dark empire's true, beating heart. And Penelope Hayes, the woman who had always been cruelly told she took up too much space, finally found a man whose love was massive enough to hold her. True love doesn't care about the numbers hiding in your bank account or the numbers showing on a scale. It's about the raw sacrifices we make when absolutely no one is watching. If Penelope and Leonardo's story proves that the greatest treasures are often hidden in the most unexpected places, smash that like button, share this incredible Mafia romance with your friends to remind them what real love looks like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic, heart-stopping stories.